we haven't seen that action yet. We haven't seen that delivery
А
yet. We
еще
don't want the
мне
words, Alex.
попался
We want the
этот
action.
самый
And if the Irish
винторез.
government delivers the action,
Ну, прикольная
which
штука.
they haven't until now,
Ну, это
then we can
ж
also say
четкий
that, well, the
прототип
words you've given us are
этого
true.
самого
We
вала.
stand to wait for that to happen. Not there yet. Action
Ну,
is always
говорю,
better
у
than
них же,
words.
я
It's good to hear
смотрю,
the words,
абсолютно
but action's much
одинаковые
better.
Jim
механизмы
Shannon, thank you
и
so much
принцип
for
действия.
joining us again on the Alex Salmon Show.
My pleasure, Alex. Thank you, and God bless you, and keep safe, boy. Thank you.
Will do, Jim.
Join us after the break when Alex speaks with former Social Democratic and Labour Party leader Alistair MacDonald to find out where the nationalist community stands with unionism in crisis over its British economic links. We'll see you then.
When old truths seem
Turn
wrong,
left.
when old rules just don't hold, and a new world that is yet to shape out, disdain becomes the etiquette, and engagement equals betrayal. When so many find themselves worlds apart, we choose to look for common ground.
Go straight.
Welcome back. At the end of last year, the Financial Times reported ONS data as
Ну,
suggesting
это
Northern Ireland
ну,
economy assumed the unusual position of
говорю, нужное
outperforming
дело.
the
А ты
rest.
Серегу к себе в помощники
This
подтягивай.
suggests that the vehement opposition to the protocol from the DUP may be based on political principle rather than economic reality. Alex puts the question to former SDLP leader Alistair MacDonald.
Alistair MacDonald, welcome back to the Alex Salmon Show.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be with you today.
Now, Alistair, you've been through a range of political crises in Northern Ireland through the years. How would you assess this one? Is this basically about the elections coming up? Is it about Democratic Unionist politics? Or do they have a genuine grievance about what
At the
seems to be the
roundabout,
irksome
take the second
regulations
exit.
of the protocol?
Well, I think it's a bit of everything. Yes, it's about elections coming up and people are bracing themselves. And the DUP were in a very weak position because they had devoured each other and they're still very split internally. The dilemma for all of us is that
Exit
basically the arrangement, the protocol arrangement that has been made between the EU and the UK, it gives Northern Ireland the best of both worlds.
Get
And it's
ready to
allowed the
turn
Northern
right.
Ireland economy to get the best of both worlds. And our trade, for instance, with the Irish
Turn
Republic
right.
has doubled or trebled since they opened up. But equally, we still have good access to the UK markets. So we have access to both EU and UK markets, and it's doing very well, and our economy is doing very well.
So you would basically agree with Paul Monaghan, for example, the chief executive of the Chamber of Commerce in Northern Ireland, who says exactly that. We're doing well. We've got preferential access to the UK. We've got total access to the EU. That's why the Northern Irish economy is a land of opportunity. And yet, individual businesses, quoted by Jim Shannon, for example, say, look, we're finding, we've got to fill in 20 forms to export our stuff to our own country. You can see their point of view.
There is no doubt that there are issues there, and basically
You have arrived at your
in order to
destination.
maintain the bipartisan, if you like, or the double benefits, there will be some losers. But those losers are those people that have extra burdens of paperwork and all the rest are in a very small minority. Anybody I talk to tells me that there are benefits and great opportunities. And the difficulties can be and will be ironed out if those with the difficulties basically are prepared to work at them and discuss them. So, where there's a will, there's a way. The problem is this, that there has been a major effort by the Democratic Unionist Party to turn the various difficulties that can be solved into issues that can't be solved and into political issues and making them a cause célèbre.
When Paul Givan resigned a week or so ago, there was hardly a huge... I mean, when I resigned as First Minister of Scotland, it was a major story. When Carwyn Jones resigned as First Minister of Wales, it was a significant story. When Theresa May resigned as Prime Minister, it was a huge story. But Paul Givan, as a First Minister, resigned, and out with the Northern Ireland, there wasn't really that much of a splash of publicity about it. Is that because there's so many other issues going on, or is it a collective shrug of the shoulders and saying, well, we'll wait after the elections?
Well, it is a collective shrug of the shoulders because the various levels of incompetence in Stormont at the moment have led the public to become disillusioned and disconnected. The public have no great aspirations or no great hopes. And the reason for that is that, the DUP, and Sinn Féin are there, they have their own agenda going off in the opposite direction. And the various interests that are there, the consensus people in the middle, are relatively impotent. And it's producing nothing, to be quite frank. It's not adding any value, it's not creating any change, it's not meeting people's hopes. So people have given up hope. And, whether Paul Givan is First Minister or isn't First Minister, really, not only does it not affect people in the wider world, it doesn't affect people in Northern Ireland all that much. It was a damp squib. And people saw it for what it was, political manoeuvring.
You've been a long-term advocate and a worker for a rapprochement between constitutional nationalism and moderate unionism in Northern Ireland. Are there any hopes for that centre-ground breakthrough in the coming elections, or will the DUP and Sinn Féin get the drumbeats of their election campaigns dominating all?
Well, they will get the drumbeats, I have no doubt, but a lot of people, a lot of my friends that might be of a different political angle, in other words, unionists, have great hopes at the moment for Doug Beattie and the Ulster Unionist Party making a recovery. And, I see that Doug has gone out of his way to move the Ulster Unionist Party into a 21st century agenda. And, okay, he has some difficulties up and down, but he has spectacularly recruited a significant number of people who were, if you like, from the same gene pool, but were not formally members of the Ulster Unionist Party. And there's a certain amount of momentum around the Ulster Unionist Party now. Whether that produces a result come an election, I'm not sure, but I would expect that it would.
Now, in your position as a constitutional nationalist, is your attitude this now, and you and your colleagues, look, things are moving our way. There's no border in the island of Ireland. There's booming trade between the south and the north. That's one of the ingredients of this rather rosy economic position relative to everyone else at the present moment. So really, basically what we've got to do is not upset the apple cart, sit tight and wait for history and economics to take their course. Is that your position, or do you think there's something else that needs to be done?
Well, there's an element of that there, but that's a passive position. And if we're going to make progress in the 21st century on this island, we have to do it proactively. There has to be a proactive engagement, and there has to be an accommodation for everybody. And the difficulty we have always had from a nationalist perspective is that unionism quite often lifts the ball and takes it off the pitch and refuses to work with us on any sort of a level pitch. And that's what the DUP are doing at the moment. I want to see a progress in terms of a new Ireland, an agreed Ireland, but I also want that Ireland to be a warm home for those who have traditionally been unionist. And I think that's the big challenge facing us, is how to accommodate unionism, particularly the unionism of the DUP, while they themselves refuse to cooperate.
Go
If you
straight.
look at the position in the Republic at the present moment, the relatively new Taoiseach, is their attitude conducive to this realignment you're calling for in Northern Ireland, or is there more that could be done from the south to assist in accommodation in the north?
Well, the South is very helpful, and the Department of Foreign Affairs
Go
in
straight.
Dublin is very, very powerful and punches way above its weight on the international stage.
At
And
the
they
roundabout,
are very, very sensitive to the
second
North,
exit.
and they attempt to work in the North in various ways that can be constructive, and they're desperately trying
Exit
to
now.
be helpful without appearing to annoy unionism unduly. The reality is that the Irish government is slowly and steadily doing the decent thing and moving us steadily towards a new version in Ireland, a new agreed Ireland. I'm not quite sure how that will work out. There's a lot of debate, a lot of discussion to be had, but I think the Irish government are doing as much as they can. Now, unionism would accuse the Irish government of not being engaged enough and not doing this and that. But, you know, these things are on a spectrum, a continuous spectrum, and you can't demand
At the
more
roundabout,
engagement
take
today
the
and
first
then
exit.
deny and not want that engagement tomorrow. It has to be consistent.
Exit now.
And I honestly think that there's a substantial degree of consistency coming in from the Irish government.
And how about the British government? From a democratic unionist perspective, they would have plenty of reason in the recent past not to trust Boris Johnson, but are they going to put their trust once again in the UK government to get them out of their fix?
Well, the DUP, the unionism generally, and the DUP in particular, throw themselves at the feet of the British Prime Minister, and Boris has thrown them under the bus a couple of times already, and will do so again. You know Boris, I know Boris, and we know how unprincipled he is. You know, he's out for himself, and the unionists are an afterthought. He will play them along when it suits him, when he needs them. But I think the problem I have is that the DUP
Keep right,
in particular
then exit
are
right.
trying to cling to a version of the British Empire that existed 100 years ago, 19 and 20, or
Exit
even before
right.
it. And that, they're attempting to recreate that, and that can't be recreated. The world's
Go
moved
straight.
on. And that's the difficulty we have here, that a lot of these people are refusing to recognise the 21st century. And that creates problems for us in the long term, because until they
Get
wake
ready
up
to
and smell
turn
the
right.
coffee in the
Да,
21st
у меня все в
century,
порядке, я пытаюсь разобраться
we're all at a loss, we're all at a stagnation stage.
с оружием.
Briefly tell us, what would be
Turn
your
right.
Тут
greatest
показывается
fear
на них
for
очень
Northern
много
Ireland looking forward
модификаций.
to the elections in May, and
И не
also
совсем.
what
Вот
would be your greatest
нашел
hope
я интересный такой
for
откидной
moving
прицел
forward?
для
Well,
М16А4.
my
Ну, на
greatest hope is that we get
М16.
ourselves
Все
together
круто. Просто на
and we make
М16
Northern
я
Ireland
ставил
work,
ОКП.
and we solve the bread and butter issues.
Прикольно, все встает,
And when we have a
красиво,
prosperous,
раз, прицелился,
functional community,
отлично все
then
работает.
we can talk
Но когда поставил
about
этот откидной,
to what degree we are part of UK,
то
what
вот
degree we
этот
are
ОКП
part of
уже не
Ireland,
ставится. И вообще
and all
больше
of that
ничего
thing.
туда
But
не
a
поставить.
dysfunctional economic basket case.
Ну, так,
There's no good to
а
nobody, and
на этот-то прицел,
nobody
то
will want
просто
us.
вот этот прицел такой, и все.
You know, the hopes are that
Go
things
straight.
will move forward constructively and steadily and slowly. We've come a long way since the Good Friday Agreement in '98. It's a lot slower than I would like, but I would like to think that we begin to gather speed, and the people that we have elected to the Assembly would find
На
ways and
этом
means of working
нажимаешь
together
Ctrl и
across.
прицел, и он вот на М1, там есть тоже откидные прицелы, ты смотришь прицел, чик, нажал, он раз в бок, и просто прицел. А что дает этот откидной? Вот он обычный прицел. Как он откидывается? Почему не откидывается?
That seems to be missing at the moment.
Вот, обычный механический, то есть с него толку никакого получается.
Thank you so much for
А
joining me
написано,
once
что
again.
откидной, я думал, ты ставишь типа, ну, коллиматор на него, на это устройство откидное. И раз, когда надо, ты откинул, там, или оптику, ты откинул, у тебя прицел. Поставил, оптика работает. А он нифига, видишь, не тот.
This is because, unlike the rest of the UK businesses, those in Northern Ireland still have unrestricted access to the EU's huge single market for goods. Then came the official statistics, showing the relative performance of the Northern Ireland economy last year as the best in living memory. This suggests that the vehement opposition to the protocol, which places an administrative border in the Irish Sea, is based on unionist principle rather than economic experience. Although it should be said that Jim Shannon points to powerful individual examples of rampant bureaucracy. Having signed the agreement just over a year ago, the UK government now seem intent on revoking it. The European Union and the USA have thus far made it clear that without the protocol, there is no Brexit deal. And so, both the Unionist community in Northern Ireland and the Conservative and Unionist Party across Britain have a choice to make. Whether economic realities should override political objectives, or whether the essential unity of the United Kingdom is really worth the economic candle. But for now, from Alex, myself, and all
еще
of us,
нашел я интересно,
goodbye,
печатная
stay safe,
плата
and hope to see you all
таймера
again
C4.
next week.
И клеймер. Но, судя по виду, тут вот нету никакого описания, просто маркировка ID. Но, судя по виду, это просто пехотная мина. Я так понимаю. Тебе попадалась
Go
такая?
straight.
Нет, написано на нем клеймор.
ものとして、接する
Ну, это та же самая пехотная мина, просто ее направленного действия, да. Ну да, их особо не применишь никуда.
例えばですよ、一番道路が燃えてる国でセックスですね。私にとっては自分の理想になれるという出会いを表現しています。
そういう人たちが多いんだということが世の中に認められてくればそういうこともなくなり、彼女らの地位も上がってくると思うんですよね。
The headlines this hour, the West changes its predicted date of a Russian invasion of Ukraine after February the 16th failed to materialise. Moscow says it's all a fabrication.
Хорош этот прицел.
As to whether the escalation will end on
Да
February
нет,
the
вот
20th,
этот...
I don't know, because we are not the ones who are escalating. We're not doing this.
Сейчас тебе
Fuel
скажу.
prices in the
Вот
UK
это
soared to
20 на
record
40
highs, leaving
градусов.
already struggling households feeling the
винтовки.
squeeze as bankers collect
Блин.
some of the biggest bonuses
Нет,
seen
это
in recent
прицел
times.
для М82. Да, как как он четко вот приближает и вообще
And the Canadian
просто
Prime Minister has
выпаливает.
branded a dictator by opposition lawmakers as
Шикарно.
fury mounts over the use of emergency powers against protesting truckers.
Let's remind the Prime Minister this is Canada. This is not a dictatorship.
Isn't this really about the Prime Minister taking a sledgehammer to Canadians that he thinks are unacceptable?
Hello, just gone 5 p.m. in Moscow. You're watching RT International. We'll start this hour too with some news just in, because Russia has expelled the deputy US ambassador to Moscow amid a diplomatic crisis over Ukraine. Washington has now said that it will retaliate. Well, earlier, Russia's top diplomat did mock American media predictions of when Russia could invade Ukraine. Some journalists are now saying it's going to happen later this week when the Olympics end, after yesterday's bet failed to materialise.
Вот эта винтовка
As to whether the escalation will end on February the 20th, I don't know.
1891 у них переключается прицел, он не откидывается, он просто смотрит под подобник. А вот на М1 он именно щелк его надо, откидывает, и это все тонировано, все работает. Блин,
Hysteria continues. There was a previous date of a couple of days ago and yesterday too, and now we have a new date for an invasion from the west, setting February the 20th as that date. Just run through what's going on here.
Well, talk about changing goalposts. February the 15th has come and gone, no invasion. February the 16th has come and gone, still no invasion. So what did the Western political establishment and the mainstream media do on Thursday the 17th? Apologize and say that their intelligence wasn't worth the paper that it was written on? No, of course not. They started backpedaling.
If something doesn't come to pass, it doesn't necessarily mean that what we've been warning of is wrong. I don't think you've heard us from any podium point to a specific day of an invasion. I think what you've heard from us from some time now is to make the point that what the Russian Federation has put in place are the capabilities it would need to order an attack at any time.
Well, Ned Price might be unwilling to give a specific date, but that hasn't stopped others from placing new bets. And as we heard from Lavrov, now almost out of thin air, the 20th of February has been plucked. Now, one almost farcical explanation given for this constant postponement of an ever-imminent invasion is that President Putin is furious that all his previous plots have been foiled, and he absolutely refuses to invade Ukraine according to the West schedule.
Yeah, and when we also hear that these deadlines have passed without consequence, we then look at the actual facts, and the facts are, and we've seen footage that Russia says it is beginning to pull back those troops and weapons.
Well, absolutely. On Tuesday, the Russian Defense Ministry announced that it was sending home a considerable chunk of those forces that had been near the border with Ukraine because they had wrapped up their drills, and really there was no reason for them to be there anymore. They even published accompanying footage showing some pretty heavy-duty weaponry loaded up on trains heading back to base. But for the people who themselves didn't provide any evidence proving this impending Russian invasion, this concrete video wasn't convincing enough.
What we haven't seen is evidence of withdrawal that has been claimed by the Kremlin. In fact, we've seen continued build-up of things like field hospitals.
What we're seeing is no meaningful pullback. President Putin's put in place the capacity to act on very short notice. He can pull the trigger, he can pull it today, he can pull it tomorrow, he can pull it next week. The forces are there if he wants to renew aggression against Ukraine.
So Russia keeps its troops at the border. It's an aggressor. It starts withdrawing its troops. It's also an aggressor. It just can't win here. An even more outlandish claim that's come out from an unnamed senior official in Washington, which doesn't particularly inspire confidence, alleges that this withdrawal is a huge bluff, and in fact the opposite is going on. The Kremlin is fortifying its forces to the tune of around 7,000 troops and brand new field hospitals.
Look at all of what's been said over the last few hours. You know, as you say, there's a lot of hysteria, but there's no effort then to sort of try and de-escalate in terms of talking and trying to say, let's, you know, continue with diplomacy. All we get is another date. It just seemed a strange situation to be in.
I think that is one way of saying it. There's definitely a sense that those propagating the hysteria have almost lost themselves in it. They've become hostage to the situation that they have created. And just so that they don't have to lose face by admitting that, okay, we were wrong, there was nothing going on, they continue along this path that they've set themselves on. It really has become a catch-22.
It is obvious that the flywheel of the anti-Russian hysteria spun in the United States does not allow American colleagues to look at things objectively. Self-hypnosis about the inevitability of the Russian attack persists.
The media seems very keen to go along with this line of World War III is just around the corner, but there are a few skeptical voices out there who are offering support to Moscow. The Czech president, for one, has made a very interesting observation that this wouldn't be the first time that US intelligence has, at best, proved to be useless and, at worst, fake.
Russians are not foolish enough to embark on an operation that will do them more harm than good. As for the U.S. Secret Services, this is their third bluff. The first was with Iraq, the second was with Afghanistan, well, the third is now.
And on top of all this, I mean, Ukraine is central, but when you look at it, it's not benefiting from any of this rhetoric, isn't it? Its economy is plummeted. People, top, politicians have left the country too. They've been told to come back. It's really suffered, and it makes you wonder or question who's benefiting from all this rhetoric that we're hearing from the West.
The recent words of the former US ambassador to Germany, that's Richard Grenell, are very worth mentioning here. Now, he is an insider, someone who knows how the political elite in the US thinks and how it acts. But even he has accused Washington of being, quote, alarmist, and stated that the war hawk rhetoric coming from the White House isn't, another quote, verifiable intelligence. So here we have even those inside of DC who are telling us that this intelligence clearly just isn't there. So exactly, it's a legitimate question. Why all this hype? Because it's definitely not benefiting the Ukrainians. And why also is the world going along with it? Here, maybe the NATO chief might have given the game away.
Moscow has made it clear that it is prepared to contest the fundamental principles that have underpinned our security for decades, and to do so by using force. I regret to say that this is the new normal in Europe. Therefore, today, ministers decided to develop options for further strengthen NATO's deterrence and defense, including to consider establishing new NATO battle groups in Central and Eastern and Southeastern Europe.
So for all the talk of de-escalation, two key words there stand out: new normal.
Yes, and not in the COVID sense. A very telling phrase, and I think regardless of what Stoltenberg there said about it being regretful, I'm not entirely convinced that is how he feels, because a new normal means new NATO combat units and bolstered defences close to Russia. It turned out to be very convenient for an alliance that was really, had slightly lost its way, and people were saying that maybe it doesn't need to exist anymore. If we're being cynical, the ever-imminent Russian invasion provided the perfect excuse for the heightened militarization of Europe, and like I said, breathe new life into NATO. And here I will always remember the words of the US diplomat, lawmaker a couple of years ago, who came out and said, we need to fly the NATO flag high around Russia from all corners, almost like a noose. So NATO's now effectively been given the green light to expand. Meanwhile, stateside, President Biden apparently is looking for more than $770 billion for the 2023 defense budget, which, by the way, is 8 times more than Russia's spending on defense, and yet, of course, it's Russia the aggressor. It is a strange thing to claim to be a huge fan of diplomacy, but then, of course, fatten up your army and inch closer and closer to Russia. All the while, Moscow is here saying that it only ever wanted to have a serious conversation about NATO missiles being deployed just a couple of minutes away. In short, it wanted to find a diplomatic solution to its very serious security concerns. But there don't seem to be many takers for diplomacy at the moment.
So Ashley Taylor there speaking to me a bit earlier now, with some frenetic diplomacy taking place almost every day in recent weeks. RT's senior correspondent Murat Gazdiev takes a look now at the steps that Western leaders have taken in regard to the ongoing Ukraine tensions.
Moscow has been busy these past few weeks. Almost every day at this point, a president or a prime minister or a foreign minister flies into Moscow for talks. And they all want what's good for them, which is, of course, only natural. All of them have something to win and something to lose. Take the States. American officials hopping back and forth Putin's phone calls with Biden.
This is about more than just Russia and Ukraine. It's about standing for what we believe in, for the future we want for our world, for liberty, the right of countless countries to choose their own destiny and the right of people to determine their own futures.
No self-respecting American president has ever refused the opportunity to give a pretty little motivational speech. But Biden isn't just in it for the cliches. His presidency is at stake. The highest inflation in 40 years, disaster with a pandemic, record low approval ratings, and midterm elections this year. A crisis over Ukraine is seemingly godsend for him. A chance to distract the masses and a chance for those speeches. Great Britain has led the crusade, if a hysterical crusade against Russia. The British media has been second only to the Americans and the number of invasion dates that they have set and were missed.
Well, it's still the case that an invasion could be imminent.
Turn right.
And it is highly likely. What we are doing is pursuing the path of deterrence and diplomacy.
Neither did many Britons like what she had to say.
Get ready to turn right.
Some ended up questioning her competence.
Turn right.
She mixed up Ukrainian and Russian provinces, sounded much like an answering machine with pre-prepared comments. I know, I was there, and I even asked her about Britain's support for separatists in Chechnya and her condemnation of separatists in Ukraine. Her answer was, I don't want to talk about it.
You have arrived at your
Thank you
destination.
for your visit, Foreign Secretary. Understandable, of course. The British Prime Minister has enough trouble at home. Johnson's very rule is being questioned with a no-confidence vote in the works. He needs to look strong. Emmanuel Macron, France's peacemaker. He came to fix it all and seems to think that he may have succeeded. He may. Putin was certainly upbeat.
Today, we are aware both of the seriousness of the situation and of the urgent need, in the interest of all, to find the path towards the preservation of peace and stability in Europe. And I deeply believe that there is still time. The historical and strategic dialogue that we have built together over the last few years can help, and it is in this context that we have indeed decided to meet today in Moscow.
Of course, he has other motives too. Not that he doesn't want peace, but he wants a cherry on top. He hasn't forgotten about Britain and America backstabbing him over Australian submarines. But it's more than that. Chancellor Merkel is gone. France has assumed presidency of the European Union. What better time to replace Germany as the top dog in Europe? All he has to do is show his skills, show that France is a significant weight on the international stage, show that the world, even Putin, listen to him. And of course, Berlin. This was Chancellor Scholz's test, they say. A staring match with Putin, which of course it wasn't. Germans are generally a pragmatic lot. They prefer negotiations rather than speeches.
I expressly agree that the diplomatic options are far from exhausted.
Scholz has established himself as the new chancellor. He was tough, he was frank, and he wants an end to the endless comparisons between him and Angela Merkel. Everything he does is compared to what she would have done. Merkel this, Merkel that. He wants out of her shadow.
It's not just because of a supposed threat of a Russian invasion, which I think has been greatly overblown, but rather because the Biden administration is under such enormous pressure. It is losing popularity, and it must do something to recover a position of credibility before the midterm elections in the United States for the Congress. So too is Prime Minister Johnson in the United Kingdom, where he faces impending challenges to his leadership. President Macron in France faces an upcoming election within a few months. And in Germany, we see the new chancellor really facing a different kind of concern, a real concern for Germany, and that is that US-Russia